Welcome to the History Taking Assessment Training Module for Moody Health Center at Texas Chiropractic College. I'm Dr. Corey Mayon, the Director of Clinical Education, and I'll be leading your training module for today. We're going to go over the basic components of a history assessment. Then I'm going to show you a live example of how to do a history assessment. When you're ready to do a history assessment, you'll access your assessment portal and fill out the intro page, which I'll show you soon. You'll select the history type and you're going to pick all the components that apply. Next are the 4 to 5 data collection points, and these are the questions that you're going to evaluate the student on. There's a notes section that's at the bottom of the assessment page that allows you to make specific comments that you see during the encounter. Remember, our assessments are averaged. You take 4 to 5 scored components, and they must average at or above the benchmark for that clinic. Lastly, remember to give feedback. The verbal feedback you give will also be documented electronically so students can refer to it later. Now let's talk about some of the questions and the handout that you received. On this page at the top, you'll see the actual questions covered during the history assessment. On the right-hand side, you'll see the letters MC and then numbers underneath. These are the meta-competencies that relate to each question that you're evaluating. We're going to go over the titles and some of the components of each question. Question number 1 is the student's reasoning. Did they ask correct family history questions? In parentheses, you'll see fail-mash as an indicator that the first question is evaluating family history taking skills. Next is their reasoning on OPPQRST or the focal history. Did the student choose and ask the correct focal history questions? Number 3, their skill and communication. Did the student speak clearly and considerately? Next is their skill and documentation. Did the student document the encounter specifics while still taking a history? Lastly is their conduct and professionalism. Did the student act appropriately? Once you've evaluated those components, then you'll go to the feedback page. You select the history assessment and then type a short description of the verbal feedback that you gave the student in the encounter or after the encounter of what went well and things to work on. If clinical education review is required, you'll type the requirements in here and then place your 4-letter verification code that only you and the clinic data manager know. Let's see what this looks like. Walk into the room, access your assessment portal, select your name. I'm attending A. Then pick the student that you're evaluating and the clinic that they are in. For this one, we'll click Clinic 4. Type the chart number, and then select the case type, alumni case study, outpatient, outreach, staff, student, or other. Other? Training. We're on the history assessment, so we'll select history, and then place next. We'll do an example of an initial encounter while taking a family history and a complaint history, and the patient has cervical pain as well as maybe a stomach ache. Now, question number 1, reasoning fail-mash. Here's your indicator. Students covered appropriate content while taking past medical and/or family history. Let's choose competent. Reasoning, OPBQRST. The student covered appropriate content while taking focal history or complaint history. Competent. Skills and communication. Students demonstrated appropriate verbal and physical communication while considering the patient's cultural, ethnic, and socioeconomic background. Here. Skills and documentation. Student accurately documented patient responses while maintaining patient privacy. And then lastly is their conduct or professionalism. Student acted professionally through appropriate bedside manner, hygiene conduct, and maintained patient confidentiality. Here. And then any notes for the encounter would be placed here. Let's say that a student is not doing the initial encounter and not doing a family history. The first question will not pertain, so you'll select NA. And then these components will be averaged together. Let's click Finish the Assessment here. Again, we did a history. And let's say that in the room I told the student they did a good job at covering all the material. Covered all material and questions. Let's say that in the room I noticed that the student was only looking at the computer while documenting and never made good eye contact with the patient. So we'll tell them to work on adding eye contact with patient during history. All right, on this instance, we'll say that clinical education review is not required, but if it were, you would fill it out here. Type in your verification code. This concludes your history training module. If you have any questions, please refer to the syllabi or handbook, as well as the handouts that you were given. For any questions that can't be found there, please refer to the following. For clinical operation questions, ask the Director of Clinical Services. For educational concerns, you can ask me, the Director of Clinical Education. And for resources, please ask the Clinic Data Manager. Thank you for your attention.